Oh, good evening, one. Good evening, all. Good evening, Chewy.
Hey, hey, hey.
Hey, hey, hey. How you doing, man?
Yeah, good. I'm nice and rugged up, as you can see.
Have you been outside yet? Are you still involved with the weather bomb?
It doesn't seem to be raining now, which is good.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
saw the moon, which is another good sign. But apart from that, it's cold. So inside.
I saw someone put out a tweet that obviously got into a website that does the weather, and they'd got a satellite image of it, and you could not see a single bit of New Zealand. The cloud was literally in the whole of New Zealand. I don't know whether that's testament to a big storm or a small country, or perhaps both. Perhaps it's both. Very good. And the dog's okay tonight? Dog's not too scared. Has dog been outside yet?
Dog has been outside. She has been away with her cousin all day today, so I think she has just pooped.
Oh,
She's
good.
asleep in the hallway at the moment.
That's that kind of poop. I thought you meant she'd just pooped. Like,
No,
no, she's tired.
she's tired.
She's dead tired. Very cool. Okay, so tonight's show, we got a lot of stuff going on tonight, actually, so we won't stuff around too much, even though we are the kings of stuffing around. Emeritus Professor Warren Tate is going to be joining us. I'm a little bit reticent to synopsize too much exactly what we're going to talk about, because I feel like, as the moron that I am, I'll probably get it wrong. But as I read the article that's just come out based on the research that he's been working on as the lead researcher, it seems there's been some kind of either breakthrough, or probably more realistically, a connection between the kind of illness long COVID is, and the connections that has to things like ME and chronic fatigue syndrome, that there's similar kinds of illnesses, even if that is the right word, illnesses, that there's similar kinds of illnesses. And so, Professor Warren Tate, Emeritus Professor Warren Tate. I've got Warren G in my head. I don't know why I just can't get that out of my head. He'll be joining us probably in 6 or 7 or 8 minutes and having a chat about that. He's also going to talk to us about the announcement made by the government today with where we're going with our next stage in COVID. That's where we're going to start the show with. So before Warren gets here, we want to have a look at New Zealand media, and the New Zealand media we're looking at today is the radio industry. The radio results are out today. I think it's a really interesting thing to look at, how the radio market is going. Now, you might kind of go, well, I mean, me and you are interested in that, Chewy, because we're kind of ex-radio guys. But actually looking at where we get our information from, and the majority of places people get it from, where they sit in the political spectrum, where they sit in the media spectrum, how that all works, and then how these media groups also kind of sell what their results have been. So, what has Newstalk ZB said about how Newstalk ZB has done? We'll have a bit of a look at that as well. Along with, also, I'm going to play a little bit of a podcast that I did a wee while ago with one of the breakfast people from Today FM, because in that podcast, I asked them, it's Mark Dye, I asked Mark what his kind of marker for success was. And I was being quite specific about, like, you guys, the station had only been going for 3 weeks, right? But I'm like, what do you want to see in the first survey? This is the first survey. So we'll play that, and then we'll have a look back and see how it's all panned out. And finally, we talked a bit about this last night. We did want to have a look at what happened on the project last night with the Nurses for Freedom, them going on. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that and see who they are and what they're about, and what they're actually saying, and go from there as well. So that's the show. It's a busy one. It's a full one. As always, if you'd like to participate, then all you need to do is type into the chat engine of the platform you're watching us on, whether it's just a salutation or whether you want to add to the conversation. We will put some of those comments in as we're going along. But often also when we get to the end of a topic, we kind of put it in the things people have been saying, so as to not interrupt too much the conversation that is going on right now. Okay, so there was an announcement today about what the government is doing in the next stage of the COVID response, I guess. And of course, all the big talk around the country was, are we going to go to red? Are we going to stay in orange? What is actually going to happen? I think it was a fairly underwhelming response, Chewy. I think that there wasn't, like, often there's the 4 p.m. or the 1 p.m. bulletin and the whole country tunes into it, I should say. I was just kind of going, oh, that's happening today, and got on with life. And I think that, well, rather than giving too many opinions about what the government has announced, let's have a look at a clip from News Hub when they were talking through what exactly has been said for today. So this is News Hub talking about the announcement today.
A miserable day in Tauranga, made gloomier for some at the prospect of wearing more masks.
Not a fan of wearing masks. I mean, the borders are open, so...
Probably 80% of the people that come into the shop are not wearing masks anymore.
I don't think wearing a mask is too big of an ask.
Just quickly, Joey, 80%. I mean, you're in and around retail. Does 80% seem right to you, or is it not what you've experienced?
That's not what I've seen, but I have seen less and less people wearing them. Like I did a little straw poll just in my shop today, and probably out of the 60 or 70 people we had through, there was probably about 20, 25 sort of coming through with no masks on. Most of them were fine with putting it on, but certainly the reaction that I got when I asked is like, oh, really?
Yeah, right.
Like, yeah.
All right, let's keep going and see what the announcement finishes off to be, because there's a really interesting thing in here about masks as well. You know us, if you've been watching, we've been banging on basically since we went into Orange about, for example, keeping masks mandatory in schools. That's been a position that we've put out here from this show, and the government has sort of made some announcements on masks today. Let's let the news item describe it, explain it.
Well, now the government's not just asking, it's begging.
It will help us get through this darkest part of winter.
My plea to you is to everybody in New Zealand is to do your bit.
To wear masks not just for yourself, but for others.
Mask wearing should be like wearing a seatbelt.
What we mean when we recommend mask use is that you should do it.
And to use the now free rats to
Test, test, test.
because our already creaking and straining health system can't take much more.
Hospitals have reported this week over 200 people reporting in sick in any one day.
And it could get even worse. This graph shows the recent cases as white dots. The red line shows what happens if the outbreak stays on this trajectory. There could be 1,200 people in hospital by August. But Dr. Bloomfield says if Kiwis start wearing masks and isolating, it could follow the blue line instead and stay below 1,000.
We can lower that peak if we take steps, if we all take steps.
I mean, if we carry on at this kind of intensity, we could be looking at 5,000 deaths a year from COVID-19. I mean, that is 15 times the road toll.
Professor Michael Baker wanted to see masks mandated more indoors.
We need to shift the norm to being a mask-using society to get us through winter and then reassess in a few months' time.
I hate wearing masks, so...
I think our immune systems are a bit weak because of wearing them for so long. So I just stopped wearing mine.
But despite a surge in cases and a health system under extreme pressure,
We are remaining at orange.
and we're sticking with the traffic light system.
The traffic light system has been complex and hard for people to understand, and inconsistently, it's hard to understand and complex.
I know some people have said that the protections are too complicated for people, but they underestimate New Zealanders.
New Zealanders now being asked to mask up and isolate more.
Well, Amelia joins us now live from Parliament. Amelia, why?
There you go. We'll leave it there. I think that pretty much is the sum total of it.
Cool. So I don't want to be on the road with Christopher Luxon. That's my main takeaway there. Traffic lights are hard.
Interesting thing about Christopher Luxon is that, I mean, yeah, obviously the tongue-in-cheek aside, is that what's the alternative? So they're complicated. They're not that complicated. There's a series of suggestions/rules to adhere to within this. So if it wasn't, I get the feeling because it's called traffic light, people are playing dumb. Like it's difficult. And let me say this, like you heard them, they're pleading with people to wear masks. They're begging people to wear masks. Just fucking mandate they wear masks. Yeah. Isn't that actually what we need to do?
I would say get rid of the traffic light system, because a traffic light without a red light is not a traffic light.
It's a warning.
I mean, that's the thing,
yeah.
is we're nowhere near going into green. There is no red light anymore, so it's just orange. So stop calling it a traffic light. There's nothing to change there. It's not going to change, at least in the medium term. And just go, wear a fucking mask. If you're inside, wear a mask.
I'll fix my camera in a second.
It looks like you've gone into the Nether zone.
Yeah, well, the camera's just zoomed out, but that's okay. We'll fix it in a second. Let me just say this as well. This is what's happening this is the basic synopsis of the announcement. And there are changes, but none of the changes are things that are actually going to stop anyone from doing anything. So all of the changes seem to be suggestions. right? So this is the new thing. They're all suggestions. Wear masks indoors, please. We're pleading with you. Get sick, stay home. For sure. And also more antiviral medicines available, especially if you're over 70, which apparently will reduce a plus 70-year-old's hospital admission by up to 90%, which is amazing. Which are all, I mean, they're good, but I'm frustrated myself in this idea that if they're that desperate to get us to wear masks, it feels to me like this, right? And I wrote down something so I could remember it. You know, it seems to me like they're suggesting, like, imagine that we're in the Autobahn, there's no speed limit, right? But they're pleading with us and they're suggesting with us to stay at 100 k's an hour. Or imagine that it's seatbelts. They're actually not enforcing seatbelts anymore. They're just pleading with us to wear seatbelts. That's not what they do for our own health, for the health of those around us. They enforce seatbelts. They enforce a speed limit. Why aren't they enforcing masks if they're getting to a point where they're basically begging us to wear them for our own good and for the good of those people around us? So it's frustrating.
It is frustrating. I mean, where is the leadership that we had last year? Where you know, all the very, very strong language backed up with facts and graphs that, you know, it was explained really well. Now it just feels like everybody's just throwing up their hands and going, well, we can't get the toothpaste back in the tube, so fucking good luck, everybody, I guess. You know, it does feel really wimpy. And I mean, there are certainly times, you know, just speaking of myself, I don't always ask people to wear a mask because I'm not ready for that fight every time, you know, or the chance of there being a fight every time. Most people are good. And then you get one guy that'll just wreck your fucking day for even saying quite softly, like I do, did you need a mask?
Yeah.
Did you want me to get one?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I can understand. Like, there's not a single person in this country that goes, I fucking love wearing masks. I'm all about it. No one likes wearing them, but you have to.
I don't know if you noticed there, my very subtle movements to get my camera back working. You probably didn't notice. I moved like a ninja in there. But look, we've got Emeritus Professor from Otago University, Warren Tate, with us. So you and I should shut up for a bit, Chewy, and we bring the experts on and have a chat to Warren. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening. I've enjoyed just hearing the last few minutes. In fact, you've taken some of the words out of my mouth.
Well, you're emeritus professor, and you're far too distinguished. We'll just take the sweary words out, and you can use all the sensible words. And how about we do this to start with? Why don't you talk to us about these announcements for today that we've just been talking about?
Yeah. Well, my feeling about this and listening to what you were saying is that we do need some strong leadership back, and I just hope perhaps when the Prime Minister comes back from the Pacific, she gets in front of us each day again, so we actually see this is really serious, you know, if the Prime Minister comes back and is speaking to us each day. And I think the message is pretty simple. I think there's a lot of noise going on at the moment about, you know, traffic lights too complex and all that sort of thing. I mean, I think, like, is it Chewy? Is that how you pronounce your name? Said, you know, we can stop talking about traffic lights. The message is simple. You know, masking is so critical, and, you know, and the thing that concerns me about not actually mandating masking more, like for indoor activities, going to the rugby tests, for example, how many people went to the rugby tests and didn't wear masks? I mean, that's a huge indoor event, even though the Dunedin Stadium is regarded, it's got open ends and it can be cold at times, it's still an indoor event. Those things are spreaders, there's no doubt about it. You know, graduation in Dunedin, the academics like me on the stage wore masks, but there weren't many masks in the body of the hall. And so that's, again, a potential area where you can spread it. So I've got a concert on Saturday night, concert for Ukraine, and we're singing in the town hall. I'm hoping everyone will come and wear masks just to protect not only themselves, but each other. And the critical thing to me is that when we started this pandemic, we were concerned not only about ourselves, but our elders, our family, our whānau, and that mindset seems to have gone. So when I hear people, and I heard on some of your clips saying, well, I'm just over wearing masks, really what they're saying is I'm over just worrying about protecting people who are more vulnerable. And it's amazing, isn't it, that in the first, I think, couple of years of the pandemic with Alpha and Delta, we had, I think, 27 deaths. Whereas today alone, what did we have? 23. And we've got the mindset we accept that. And who are dying? It's the 60s and mainly 70s, 80s and 90s. And maybe I'm biased because I'm 75 and I feel pretty vulnerable. But, I think that we've got to be in a mindset where, even though we don't enjoy wearing masks, I wear a mask pretty well all day, except when I'm in my office, behind closed doors. And I don't like it at all, but it's the new norm, I think. It should be the new norm, because even though Christopher Luxon seems to say, well, the world is over talking about COVID and we're over it, COVID's not over us.
Yeah.
And so, we've got to kind of recognize that and just get used to the new norm. And of course, we all hope that it won't last forever, but it's certainly ongoing now. And we can't predict really what the next year will be, whether we get a new variant, which is not only more infectious like the BA5, which is circulating now, but it might be one which is even more dangerous. And what did I hear today? That Dunedin Hospital has its COVID ward is full and some extra rooms, and it's spread to other wards. So these are really serious things that are going on that are sort of going underneath the radar of the person in the street who's just wandering around without a mask. And, if you go on public transport, I mean, the bus driver, doesn't he or she deserve us to be wearing masks because he's in the bus all day?
Yeah.
And, to me, going to the supermarket right from the beginning of the pandemic, so I thought the checkout people were wonderful. They really stepped up and kept us safe by going in there. But they were in there all day, and they're in there again all day. And I think we owe it to them to recognize that just because we're over wearing a mask, think about these other people around us, our health workers, who are basically, stretched to the limit trying to keep us going. So, at times I get a bit steamed up about this, of just the fact that everybody's over wearing masks and over this and over that. I think we've got to realize that the norm is we can't afford to be over it at the moment.
Yeah.
And certainly in indoor things, And
As
can I
for
say a word about, sorry?
So I was just going to say, as you said, we're talking about why this announcement has happened today and why does it feel like it's not really like a legislative change for good. It's more about the, could you please, wouldn't you mind? And I think that Tiger Country, who is watching at the moment, has probably hit the nail on the head, says the polls are making them, Labour, timid. The writing's on the wall for them to lose the next election, and they are desperately trying to piss off as few people as possible. I can't find too many holes in that logic. Be it true or not, we don't know, but I can't find many holes in that perception.
Well, it is puzzling to me why, there isn't a stronger message about, masking and just just a stronger message. I mean, I don't like kind of being told what to do all of the time, but at times we have to, and I think this is one so I don't necessarily disagree with that, but, I mean, the urging doesn't sound very loud to me. And the other thing was about the antivirals. Now I thought there might have been a bigger step on that. They've gone to the 75 pluses, and so that's great for me because at 75, I think that means I'll be eligible if I get COVID. And I know it's gone from 2 to 10% of the population. But the average age of people in hospital is in their lower 60s, right. And they are still sort of dying. So I would have thought you would have wanted to bring the open access of antivirals to the 60 and over, not the 75s and over. So it seems that's a rather timid gesture to me as well, unless we have limited stocks of them in the country and they're worried about that, we might run out for those that really need it. So, yeah. And the offer of free masks and and rat tests, and you've got to apply for them. I mean, that's not going to change the mindset, I think, of the country at the moment. So, yeah. So I'm all for all what you were saying before I came on, really, which is, we need to take masking
seriously. Do you want to jump in, or are we going to go on to the next bit about the research?
Yeah, I think there was just one thought I had. Obviously, they said, free masks, normal medical masks for most, and N95s if you reach a certain criteria. And I was just like, are they at that level of penny pinching at that point?
Yeah.
I mean, I got a box of 20 N95s for like less than $20 at a supermarket the other day. And the thing with the N95s is that they are reusable. You just use them in a rotation. And so my box of 20 is me and my partner done now for the sake of $20. I was just really surprised by what just seems to be a like, surely you can get these. Surely it's not a money thing.
Yeah. No, I agree. We got 100 N95s the other day because we've got a big house. I think I paid $78 for them off the internet for 100 N95s.
Yeah. Can I just add one other small point, and that is that there was a comment today that most of the infections are arising at home and in school, and so that's kind of not a reason to, push harder on the masking in other indoor places. But or home and work, and if it's home, it's largely going to be coming from school still. I mean, because reinfections are occurring, and so I mean, I think thinking about masking at school for a certain age of children, is something that should be taken really seriously, because that's been a major conduit for the illness coming into the homes, and then spreading to the families and then spreading to the older people.
Yeah. Hey, Professor Tate, can we get on to the research that you've been involved in recently? If I bring up the article that we got it from, let me read a bit of this out for people who are listening to the audio podcast. Researchers have uncovered how post-viral fatigue syndromes, including long COVID, become life-changing diseases and why patients suffer frequent relapses. Now, I'm incapable of saying all these words, a mixture of my IQ and my dyslexia, but we're talking about ME and chronic fatigue syndrome. The way I read this is what your research has discovered, a group of yours researchers discovered, is that long COVID can kind of be put in that group with those because it has similar outworkings to us. It affects us in a similar way. Am I reading that correctly?
Well, yeah, I can go even further, because we've now done molecular studies and just got the first results from the first part of the molecular study. And in terms of, we look at the proteins of the immune cells of patients, and we did a pilot study on comparing ME. I've worked on ME for 10 years, so I've got a lot of data on ME, and I know defined a molecular signature for it in immune cells. So we looked at a comparison of ME and long COVID patients, and the results are very closely overlapping and well separated from age, gender matched healthy control. So we can say, in terms of what's happening with the molecular biology of the body, the illnesses are looking very similar in what the immune cells are doing. But the symptoms are very similar. The World Health definition that came out in October 2021 for long COVID is almost identical for the clinical case definition for ME/CFS. So they are very closely related diseases. The difference is that long COVID comes, of course, from just the single virus, the SARS virus, whereas ME comes from a number of, if you like, boutique outbreaks, and the Epstein-Barr virus, glandular fever virus endemically in the community, can also arise from severe stress events like surgery and from exposure to toxic agricultural chemicals. So it has a kind of a wider base of onset compared with long COVID, which is just one. The critical thing is that most infectious diseases that we are exposed to during our lifetime, a small minority of people get an ongoing post-viral disease. Now, that sort of goes under the radar of scientists like myself generally, or clinicians, but the people who get affected, of course, they have to struggle on during their life, and sometimes it's lifelong, just like ME is. Now, ME affects 25,000 New Zealanders, so it's not a trivial number. There's a lot who, live very fragile lives every day, trying to interact with their communities, and really they haven't received much support. So the good thing about COVID and long COVID is that the long onset of long COVID, because there's been so many COVID infections, 500 million worldwide now, and 10 to 30% of people go on to get long COVID, particularly for the first variants. So there's huge numbers. So it's in the faces of the scientists and the medical profession, and now something is going to be done about this. And so what we've recently done is I sat down over the summer with an outstanding medical student, Max Walker in Dunedin, and we developed a model to try and understand holistically what was going on in both of these diseases, and what we know is that you and I, hopefully, if we got COVID, what would happen is that our body would mount an inflammatory immune response, but after a short time, that would fall away and would go into a healing response. And that's what most people do. With people getting ME after a viral illness, or getting long COVID after COVID, they can go into a healing response, but then the immune inflammatory response flares up again and is ongoing. And so what we wanted to do is to ask, what causes the disease? Why is it ongoing? And ME, it's for most people, it's lifelong. What allows that to happen? And also they suffer frequent, quite serious relapses. What causes the relapses? And so we investigated really what's known in terms of human physiology, to try and think, how can the effect on what we call our peripheral system, our blood immune system, how can that get communicated to the brain? Because we know these are neurological diseases. The people that suffer from ME and long COVID have brain fog. They have fatigue and brain fog, and difficulty sleeping, and effects on circadian rhythm, and effects on their homeostatic mechanisms that control blood sugar and heart rate and things like that. So we've proposed a number of ways in which the signal gets to the brain, and then the brain becomes inflamed, what we call neuroinflammation. There's evidence now for that. And we think it's sort of a fluctuating, probably low-level neuroinflammation, which is sustaining the disease. And because the brain controls everything, it signals back to the body that it's in trouble, there's danger. And so it sustains the body's response. And so there's a vicious cycle sets up. And then there's one other element which relates to what happens to these people, and that is that just little daily stresses that we go through, in which we manage, and we manage from a cluster of neurons in our brain called within the paraventricular nucleus, the stress center. People with ME or long COVID, they don't cope with that stress. And so the brain thinks it's suffering from a major stressful event. And that also sort of enhances the disease and the shutdown, if you like, the cell danger response. So what does all that mean? Well, what we've tried to do is to look then to see what are the molecular mechanisms that's causing this in the brain and in the body, and can we actually identify areas that might be targets where we could actually start developing a therapeutic approach to reverse it? Because with ME, I've been associated with ME for 30 years as being a part of an ME family. There's been no effective therapeutics. But the positive thing now is, because everybody's so interested in long COVID, and over $1 billion in research funding has been promised in the US, where there was virtually nothing for ME before this. We have the possibility of actually investigating these kinds of things, you know, in a very deep manner, and so we've kind of tried to establish the platform to do this, you know, with our model, in the hope that you know, research can go on not only to ameliorate the symptoms of the disease, but we think it's possible to reverse it, because ME and we think long COVID, they're not neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease. And so I believe that it is actually reversible if we could just find the switch to flick back.
Wow, that's just fascinating stuff. I mean, as someone that got glandular fever back in high school, I remember how much that kicked the hell out of me for months afterwards.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking a few months ago of like, well, this sounds like what a lot of people are dealing with long COVID. A friend of mine in the UK was dealing with brain fog like months after he caught it. And to be honest, that was one of the things that really scared me, is I didn't want to have to deal with that.
No. Well, you know, I have a lot of people contact me now, patients and both with ME as well as long COVID. And of course, the people with long COVID and their families are very fearful. You know, they don't almost want to think ahead that this is going to be lifelong or long term. And so, you know, as a researcher, I feel a responsibility to, you know, try and do the very best to see if we can find out how we can stop this occurring with the long COVID, and also help people with ME that have had the disease for 30, 40 years. You know, in my own family, my daughter's had it, you know, lives with it every day and has had it for over 30 years. So, but there's an opportunity. And I think, as I say, why I'm optimistic is because I don't think this is irreversible. I think it is a reversible disease if we can just actually find the right sort of triggers to pull, as it were.
Oh, looks like we can't hear Pat. Hopefully, you know, there's people doing work around this all over the world. You know, if you want to get something done, you've got to throw some money and bodies at people. So hopefully that's what we get out of this.
Yeah, no, well, that is the big hope, because you know, it hasn't happened up to now, but now, you know, the world focuses on it, and even in New Zealand, there's a lot of talk now whether money will come forward. But my work has been funded largely by donations of families affected by ME and the National Society in the last 5 years. You know, and people are very generous, and so it's, you know, it's enabled me to keep going and do some quite significant studies. So, you know, and that's what we're going to continue to try and do.
Oh, awesome. Oh, well, I don't know what's happened to Pat. So
hi.
Oh, he might be back. Are we back, Pat?
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
My apologies about that. I genuinely had a little technical glitch, and we've been keeping you for far too long, Professor Tate. But I did want to ask you one question, if that's okay. You're quoted as being said in this article that the work that you've done highlighted that there is the word jumped out of my head, a subset of people who are more susceptible to these situations. Just really quickly, is there some kind of marker that we know about for more susceptible people? Is that something that we can, like, so therefore we can predict who might be more or less likely to go down this path?
I've started a study on this. You know, people sort of say, well, there's a genetic susceptibility, but when you look at the world literature, there's virtually nothing on it. So I've got a master's student at the moment who's got ME herself, who's doing a study on looking for family connections. In other words, a susceptibility in families. And we've taken the first steps of trying to identify, so we can predict if someone gets glandular fever, for example, like Chewy had, whether he would be at a risk for coming down with ME, because about 1 in 20 people who get glandular fever go on to get ME. So that's you know, it's a $64 million question, and one of the most important questions is to try and identify this susceptible group of people, because at the moment we don't know. You know, we don't know who's going to develop long COVID. It might be a healthy 20-year-old who's at university. It doesn't have to be an older person. It could be someone who has had COVID and hardly had any symptoms can come down with long COVID, you know. So these are the unknowns.
All right. Hey, look, thank you very much. I apologize again for the technical difficulties. I'm sure you and Chewy had a lovely chat there. I look forward to seeing what you guys talked about. That is Emeritus Professor Warren Tate from the Department of Biochemistry at the University of Otago. Thanks, Warren. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. No, thank you. Enjoyed talking with you.
So there you go. Sorry about that, Chewy. I'm not sure quite what went on there. And then I came back and the computer decided to identify the other camera that I normally point at the dog as the one, and then, oh, nightmarish. So I apologize. Look, let's get to some of these messages. Look, maybe we'll drop a story tonight and pick it up tomorrow night, because we don't want to go forever, and it's already kind of 22 minutes to 11. But most importantly, nice giant swan dry texture. I think that one's aimed at you. Talking about what's going on at the moment. Labor has become politically scared to mandate. National is blatant, is partially to blame, not backing them up. I agree with that as well. This is talking about both the media, which we might talk about next, and also COVID. Media is worse, says David. Today, FM's Rachel Smalley complained about Professor Baker saying, going out while unwell is just like driving drunk. You're going to kill people, which is true, as fear-mongering. So she said that him saying that was fear-mongering. Right.
I think that's a fair analogy.
Yeah, I think so too, actually. And it doesn't seem like fear-mongering. It seems fair. The RW, is that right wing? The RW, maybe?
Yeah.
Could have made masks, oh yeah, the right wing, bipartisan, taken all the politics out of it. But no, every issue is an opportunity to attack. Labor isn't doing well in the polls at the moment, so they won't risk it. Yeah, that's a thread that's coming through, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we talked in the early days about the analogy of going to war, that this country had an enemy to beat, and that was COVID.
Yeah. And
to do that, you know, traditionally both sides of the house have united against a common enemy, and we only got the briefest glimpse of that. And then it's like everybody's realized, oh shit, there's an election next year, better get on the grind.
Well, it wasn't even that brief,
because another one of an issue, you know, another one of the same issues.
Remember, Simon Bridges came out, you know, claiming all sorts of things, and then he got rolled because he did. So I guess there was unity then, and then over it. And as we were talking about where people are getting COVID from. Kim says most people I know, including her, have caught it from their kids. Tiger says, my wife caught it from an out-of-town friend who wasn't showing any symptoms. We only know it was her because everyone else she visited whilst in town caught it as well. Oh, bugger. And then PSP. PlayStation. Evidence of ongoing brain inflammation 10+ month period post-COVID could significantly increase worldwide dementia burden. Well, that's interesting. I guess that's a projection for long term. We shall see. All right. Is there anything else you want to add to that, my friend, or shall we keep on trucking? Because
just one thing. I've usually got a pretty good immune system. So one of the things that I was most worried about is that I would get it and not show symptoms and then spread it around. So I mean, that's one of the other many reasons that I've decided to stay pretty diligently masked all of the time, because you don't know. You don't know if you've got it.
I'm a bit the same. I've said to people, and look, just to tell people, I'm still negative because I got exposed to it on Sunday morning, potentially exposed to it. Someone who was in my studio for 90 minutes who did a rat to come in, and it was negative, but then within 24 hours they were positive. So you're kind of on that edge. You know, if they did a rat with me and they were negative, and then like an hour later they'd got enough viral load to be positive, I could have been exposed, but there's nothing yet, and I'm still negative, and I'm still feeling well, but I'm still taking cautions. You know, my kids are due to go back to their mums tomorrow, and I normally, when we get the kids to rat before they go, but the whole house is going to rat tomorrow before they leave, because if I was asymptomatic and got it tomorrow, I don't want to send the kids back after exposing them, which then would expose that household. You know, it's looking after one another. Also, here's a congratulatory thing for you from Tiger. Well done, Chewy. Jumped in and saved the day.
Oh, it's just like, this really is coming to a natural conclusion, and Pat is not here, so I guess we'll just awkwardly talk to each other.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry. All right. Hey, listen, we've talked a little bit about radio in the last wee while, and I'd like to actually pick up on that because I love radio. And it's interesting to look at, specifically, we've been talking about Today FM. They're featured quite heavily in the show with their commentary. And today was radio research that came out looking at who is rating where. Now, I won't go too into the details, but I love this stuff. When I used to work in radio, there's special computers you could go to delve deep into it. And we used to look up all the things and all the shows and the time, because although this, like, you can look up shows on the radio rating that says to things like these are the shows from 6 a.m. till 9 a.m., but actually a breakfast show goes till 10 a.m. So you got to go deep into it and get the full number. And I'd love it. There's wood, let's be honest. So I won't go too deep into it with you guys, but just to say, and I jotted this down. Where the heck did I jot it down? For the Auckland market is seen as sort of the most important individual market, obviously because it's biggest for advertising. In the Auckland market, News Talk ZB was number one in both percentage of people listening and the number of people listening. So there's a little formula they do where the number of people listening and the amount of time they listen for gives an overall percentage, right? So if you've got one station that's got 100 people who all listen for a minute each, that's not as valuable as the station who's got 50 people, but they listen for 10 hours each because they're more exposed to the advertising and stuff. So the percentage is a formula between the how long people listen for and how many there are, and then the number of people is just a flat number of people who have listened at any stage. And in Auckland, ZB is number one in both of those areas. The Breeze is number two in both those areas, and My FM is number three in both of those areas. So percentage and number of audience. Nationwide, ZB is number one in both of those areas. The Breeze is number two in both of those areas, which is kind of weird because often you'll get a station that's got the most number of listeners, but it might be something like The Edge has been traditionally in the past, and their listeners don't typically listen for very long because they're younger and they're flitty and they come in and out, whereas a more traditional brand with older people will typically listen for longer. So often you'll have like an older brand have the most percentage share because their listeners are fewer but listen for longer than a younger brand that has more listeners but they're a bit more flighty. But in this instance, nationwide, number 1, 2, 3 goes ZB, The Breeze, and More FM, and they're all number 1, 2, 3 on those two things. In Auckland, so ZB is number one on 16.8 in Auckland. Nationwide, it's number one on 15.4. Today FM in Auckland was 1% at number 19. Today FM, not that there's anything wrong with us, but this is because we've been looking at Today FM since we've been starting here. Today FM was number 14 nationwide on 1.8%. 111,000 listeners in nationwide, 37,000 listeners in Auckland, compared to ZB, 300,000 listeners in Auckland and 600,000 nationwide. Now, it's a really interesting thing to look at. And it's interesting to see what people do and what radio stations do with this. So ZB has come out, right, very clearly, claims top spot. New Zealand Herald are obviously owned by NZME. And, you know, for 14 years running, News Talk ZB remains the top country commercial radio network according to the latest results. Yada, yada, yada. They've done very well. They've done very well. Fantastic. Aren't they amazing? However, the actual story, and that is, like, no one can challenge Mike Hosking. You know, give credit where credit is due. And then David's talking about RNZ National. They're not mentioned because they're not commercial. Correct, David. You're spot on. But if you actually have a look at the numbers down here, now this is the combination of stations, right? So you can see actually MediaWorks, which is not the ZB brand, as other brands, have 52%, and NZME, which is a ZB brand and others, has 39%. So actually MediaWorks has dominated the Auckland marketplace. And if you go nationwide, MediaWorks again, 54.5% versus 37.5% is dominating. So actually, MediaWorks is doing a lot better overall. But of course, what the radio industry does is they sell it as who's number one. And number one is ZB. But if you look at the top 10 in both areas, NZME has stations at number 1, 7, and 8 in Auckland, right? MediaWorks has 2, 3, 4, 6, 9, and 10. That was nationwide, sorry. In Auckland, NZME has stations at 1, 6, 8, 10, and MediaWorks has 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 9, 10. So it's a really interesting thing to look at. And what I thought I'd show you is I did a podcast not too long ago with Mark Dye. Mark Dye is one of the breakfast hosts on Today FM. And the reason I'm going to show you a little bit of this, as strange as it is watching myself, is I asked Mark Dye the question, what does success mean to you? And I was talking kind of generally as well, i.e. in your personal life, what does it mean? In your business life, what does it mean? But also, this is this brand new baby that at that stage was only 3 weeks old, being Today FM. What does that look like to you? And I thought I'd play it for you guys so you can hear. And I think it's clear that Today FM is a 10-year plan. right? And I think it's clear that they are where they are, and they're basically where they are is right about where Magic was. Magic Talk, which is what they've taken over from. They really haven't increased or decreased. They're pretty much spot on, which is actually quite a good result, because when you change things in a radio station, you always lose audience.
And it takes pretty big changes too, to be fair.
Yeah, they were massive changes. So to actually hold your numbers, even though it might sound smaller compared to ZB, was really interesting, and I think quite successful for them. Mark talks a little bit here about what he thinks success is, but he also gives the plan for MediaWorks radio stations and what they're trying to do. And it sounds much more holistic. So when you think about, as I said, the group with NZME, which is the ZB, being 1, 7, and 8, but you hear MediaWorks is 2, 3, 4, 4, 6, 9, 10, their stations, right? I think what MediaWorks is trying to do is have a more, not holistic as in, everyone's happy moonbeams, but they want to dominate they want to have the biggest group, whereas NZME seems to want to have the biggest station. And actually probably financially the biggest group is always going to be better than the singular biggest station.
And it's been that way for 20 years.
Here in Dunedin, it's 2-1. In Dunedin, MediaWorks is about mid 60% of the market, and NZME is about mid 30s. It's like a 2-1 difference. So it's actually even bigger in Dunedin. Have a listen to what Mark Dye's got to say about that success thing. It's an interesting perspective that he comes from. And obviously, I'm not trying to beat up on anybody here, obviously, because I actually think what they've done is quite good. But I'm sure when you have these ideas in your head about being as successful as you can, and ultimately everyone wants to be number one in what they do. But I think overall, he explains that success in this early stages is kind of building the group brand, which is MediaWorks, rather than the individual brand, which is Today FM. Let's have a listen. Look, last series of questions. I want to talk to you about success briefly. I like to know from you in a couple of areas, what do you consider to be indicative of success? What is success to you? And like in your personal life, you're in a partnership, you've got a business, yada, yada, yada. But I also would like, because I'm a radio slut, I'm an absolute floozy when it comes to radio. Yeah. I mean, like I know, and don't bullshit me, and don't go like, oh, we're just the new guys, and any good result is, there'll be a marker that if you don't hit with, for example, radio surveys, you'll be like, bugger. Like, what is success for you in these initial stages, first few surveys of radio? And I'd also like to know what's success for you in your personal life.
In the first few surveys, I think that's tough.
What? 3%, 5%, 7%? What do you want to see?
Oh shit! If we hit 5, my God, the party.
1%.
Yeah, I think we're on 1.1 now. Yes,
which is pretty much what the result was.
I think we might even be 0.8 underneath the margin of error currently. So, look, to go up 1% or to go, anything more than 1, I think in the first year, I'd be happy with. The cool thing that both Dallas and Cam, who's the CEO at MediaWorks, have said is that this is not something that we're focusing on for 6 months and then going to go, bugger it, and we're away. This is a long-term play. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, look, I think from a personal point of view, look, I just want to go up. I haven't sat down and actually thought about how much I want it to go up, or where that mark is. I just want it to go up. I think if it went down, I'd be horrified. But for it to just to go up, and if it goes up more than 1, then amazing. But I don't think, I think focusing on what that first or second survey is kind of.
But it sounds like what you're saying is, and I'm not talking about success of the unit of staff or success of the cohesion of your team, but from a commercial point, success would be, whether it's 1/10 of 1% or 1%, an increasing audience would be what you'd be hoping to get when it comes to that purely radio broadcasting side of things.
Yeah, totally. Well, to be honest, an increasing audience, because I think that validates what we're doing. But if we can continue to get the feedback that we're getting, and also the constructive feedback, not about just us and what we're broadcasting, but the content that we're creating, then I think that in itself is almost enough of a pat on the back. Going to meetings with Nubu and having people talk.
So that's pretty much it. And he's talking about the feedback he's getting from out in the public as well. To answer Carl's question, Carl asked the question, does MediaWorks covering the most demographics means it's an easier sell for advertisers? Well, I mean, it depends, doesn't it? I don't know the exact answer to that, but if you're, let's just pick numbers. If you've got half the audience, but you charge a third the rate, then actually your dollar for advertising would be better. Than twice the audience at 3 times the amount. So it really does depend. And both networks, and I can't list them all out for you, I could if I stopped and thought about it, basically have the same stations. You like ZM on NZME versus The Edge on things like the sound on MediaWorks versus Hodaki on, and there's ZB and there's Today. And so they kind of all have similar stations all the way down. But it seems that MediaWorks dominates with the Breeze and with More FM, which are a similar audience, but they seem to be winning quite well with that.
Yeah, I think Today's in an interesting position. Like, certainly, as you said, look, they didn't hemorrhage listeners compared to when they were Magic Talk, and there was a lot of roster changes there. Today's the one that Tova's on now, eh? Yeah. And I think the fact that they've got her suggests that they are going to go real hard on the election next year as well. So
she's amazing.
Good scopes. Yeah,
she's amazing.
I find her really divisive because
really
she does go after everybody, and sometimes it's people that I like. And she's mean and horrible, and then she gets a good score against someone I don't like. I'm like, yeah, she's the best. But yeah, I think, give someone another option. I mean, you're right. The competing networks, they in essence kind of mirror each other's products. And that's the spread. I mean, I remember my days. I worked in advertising, in copywriting and stuff like that. So I know that the survey is purely so you can crunch some numbers and show your advertisers, look, you want to talk to people between the ages of 20 and 32. Well, our station's got the most listeners. Spend money with us. That's the whole game. I even had a go at filling out one of those survey books.
Oh, did you?
Oh my God. I was so excited to get it. And then it's about an inch thick. And it's like, so every 15 minutes of your day, fill out what you were listening to. And I was like, oh my God, this is terribly boring.
The other thing that I think is interesting about this, and maybe I'll bring it up one more time. Someone says they're surprised to see the BBC there. No, the World Service is there, and they enter. Sometimes you don't see smaller stations there because it's quite expensive. I don't know what the exact market is, but it might be like 50 grand or something to be a part of this. So for a smaller station, it can be a lot. But the thing that's interesting about this, and this is the nationwide number. So this is what basically plays all through the country. There's ZB there, number 1 on 15.4%. Number 2 is the Breeze on 10.8%. And you can see the only other talk brand is Today, and it's down here on 1.8, and it hasn't changed, right? But the thing that's interesting about this,
dinosaurs.
But I think it's pretty unequivocal to say that ZB has a right-leaning, if not right-wing, perspective on the world, especially with their commentary hosts. And what I find interesting is that's also therefore the biggest disseminator of radio information. And is that because, much like around the world, conservative / right-wing radio is what rates, and arguably Today is not that. Today is much more balanced and nuanced, or is it just that they are the best at what they do, and what they do the best at, and so they get the audience no matter what?
Or is it that their listeners have the tenacity to fill out that enormous survey book? Meanwhile, the young, motivated people like myself
change the channels. Like they've got they're all 90, and their grandsons or great grandsons have set the station for them, and they don't know how to change it because it's a whiz bang kind of electrical thing rather than the old crystal set. Maybe that's what it is.
There's definitely a lot of taxis out there where the radio only does ZB.
Well, in Auckland, right, when I was doing radio, I was based in Auckland, is that My FM used to get a very good market because they were 88.6 on the dial. And of course, in the Japanese import, it stopped at 89.8, I think it was. So ZB was 89.4, My FM was 88.6. And so My FM was kind of the only music station you could listen to in Auckland if you had a Japanese import. and they didn't do it on purpose. It's just the number they got, but they milked that for all it's worth. And it's one of the reasons they had success. Not so much now; they're just a good station. But back in the early days, it's one of the reasons, I reckon. Hey, we better keep going because we've got one more topic to do, and it's like 5 to 11. How is everybody out there? You all right? Everyone's sticking with us? There's a few comments going on there. Simon's the one who said
good question from Rex about the surveys.
About the covering most demographics.
Online podcasts, or is it only terrestrial? I don't know what it is now.
Yeah, that's only terrestrial.
Yeah,
that's only terrestrial. Don't think I can see that question. So many questions. Is that was there? Sorry, I see it now. It's just popped up now. My little system might be a bit behind you. Younger people flitting in and out of radio, do they engage more in online radio content? Yeah, look, and I have to be honest, I love radio. I love talk radio. I love to get back into it one day. But I'm not a huge listener of it. I mean, I get out of doing this and my podcasts all the enjoyment I used to get out of doing talkback. More so, in fact, without the restrictions. I was thinking as we were talking to Professor Warren Tate, that he was answering questions like he was doing a lecture, and I literally thought you couldn't do this in radio because there would have had to have been 2 ad breaks played by then. I would have had to have gone, hey, look, I'm very sorry, but can you stop for a second? We'll be back to you in 90 seconds. And that's one of the things I think all the academics that come on here love about this, and not just this, but other podcasts and stuff as well. They can just go, they can talk, they can get their answers out. They don't have any time restrictions at all, only the ones they put on themselves. And it was a nice little reminder of why this kind of medium is so much fun. So much fun.
I find it really interesting because obviously there is so much weight on terrestrial signals for the survey and that sort of thing, but pretty much all of these brands are pushing out more podcasts, more web clips, listen on our website, all of this sort of stuff, because they know people aren't listening to terrestrial radio as much. I mean, working in the industry ruined me for listening to commercial radio now. It's all just online. It's all don't give me the ads, give me the content. And I think everybody's trying to work out how to pivot that and still pay their rent.
Yeah, and look, the problem is now you're going to set me off into a fucking conversation in a minute, bro. But I really don't mean any disrespect to any radio network. In fact, we're on a MediaWorks brand with this show. We play out on Rover. Now, we have no affiliation with them. We're not owned by them or anything. They just literally carry our podcast like they do many other podcasts. This content. So if you're listening on Rover, hi, come see us one night live at 10. But radio stations in general, in my opinion, don't do good podcasting because they treat their podcasts like radios. Like they have a thing called dynamic advertising, which is advertising that they put in amongst and it changes out. So if you listen one week, you might get podcast adverts, and the week after there might be different adverts. That's not how podcasting works. That's a radio station on the internet. And so I think that, and I'm not saying that that's bad. In fact, there was a lot of talk around the podcast industry. There was a New Zealand Podcast Awards last year, and the guys from MediaWorks on RNZ won one of the podcasts, and the fucker from MediaWorks was like, literally on Facebook, I didn't even know I was a podcaster. I just won a podcast award. And there's all of us guys who are grinding doing actual podcasts rather than just a repeat of a radio station who are like, man, this means nothing. This is dead to us now. So I mean, I'm not trying to sound bitter. I'm just trying to be honest that I think radio stations do radio replays. They do online radio. It's a very different thing to do a podcast. And this actually, and what we're talking about, this isn't a podcast. This is a live stream news conversation that we put the audio up. A podcast is that thing you were watching that I was playing from Mark Dye. That's my podcast. This, I don't even know what the fuck this is. This is my live stream broadcast. What is this, Chewy? Our daily news conversation. But
I'm down with all of this. But yeah, I've struggled to describe it. I call it your podcast thing. As I said, my partner Claire calls it Big Hairy Nadges.
Big Hairy Nadges.
Big Hairy Nadges.
Yeah.
Should put some respect on that name. Maybe that's why Radio New Zealand consistently does really good podcasts.
Yeah, maybe because they don't have that. They don't have that. Yeah, you might, and that's probably fair. You know, and then but they don't do commercial radio, and they've got the resource to put into it. Like I know people who get you'd be fucking amazed. Like I know people who have been paid 30 grand to make a 10-part podcast series for a mainstream media company, right? And there's just crazy money in it. And you know, I don't know. I like the kind of Mark Maron, even though he's one of the biggest podcasts in the world, doing it out of his garage with a couple of mics, and that's it. That's podcasting. You know, it's just like it doesn't need all the production values, because it's like watching. It's the difference, and you'll appreciate this, Chewy, being a movie buff. It's like appreciating a lesser quality produced movie with the best story in the world, or the most amazing, you know, CGI movie with the worst story in the world. So basically anything with Jaden Smith in it that's been produced by Will Smith looks fantastic, utter trash, versus, you know, Casablanca. That, do you know what I mean? It's like, and so I kind of feel the same about podcasting. You don't need all the whiz bang. If you can have the whiz bang, it'd be amazing as well. And that's kind of what RNZ does, because they've got the money. Great. But
people ask me about
enough.
People ask me about podcasts. I recommend 2 from Radio New Zealand. You got James Nakise's eating fried chicken in the shower, which is amazing, and Black Sheep. I have recommended Black Sheep to so many people because it's so good.
Yeah. All right. Stop me talking about. It's weird talking about podcasting. You're a podcaster and you're kind of doing something that's a little bit like a podcast. Let's talk about something more fun. Nurses for Freedom. This was the thing that was on the project last night. I've actually spoken to today, and I won't even say who, but someone who's connected with the project. I won't say how connected or how not, and kind of said to them, "Hey, do you want to come on? Because we want to know about how this all happened." And they were like, "Fuck no!" I didn't say fuck no, but they said no. They wouldn't come on to talk about it. Here's a little bit of the interview last night between the project hosts and the people who don't want to be vaccinated but think they're nurses.
Joining us now, Nurses for Freedom representative Deborah Cunliffe. Deborah, what are you calling for here?
Nurses for Freedom said I'd like to see an end to the mandates and all healthcare practitioners return to work to support a healthcare system that's clearly in crisis.
We hired a polling company today, an impartial polling company. We asked, should unvaccinated nurses be allowed back to work? 57% of New Zealanders said yes, and 43% said no. What do you make of those numbers?
Hi, Jesse. Kiwis are a really sensible bunch, so we're not surprised at all, and it backs up what we're hearing from the public. Mandated nurses have a lot of support behind them, and healthcare clearly matters to the people of New Zealand. Our nurses want to help.
If the nurses did go back, would you be happy for patients to choose to be treated by only vaccinated nurses if they so desired?
Hi, Jeremy. Absolutely. Personal choice is the key here, and it has been all along. What we would like to do is employ risk mitigation strategies such as rat testing or PPE, so that we can assure the New Zealand public we're not going to pass on COVID any more than a vaccinated nurse.
Right, that'll do.
That doesn't sound very true at all.
Well, let's get to a few things that were just said. The first thing is,
big old lie.
Her name again is someone Cunliffe. Does her name pop up? Her name is. I'm gonna have to go find out her official name because I thought did I write it down? Her surname is.
The last name was Cunliffe.
Let's just. Oh, that's because that's Jeremy. Hang on, because we want to make sure we get the person's name correct. Okay, I'm just going to play this bit again. Sorry, this is unprofessional of me, but I want it unprofessional. There you go.
Joining us now, Nurses for Freedom representative Deborah Cunliffe.
Okay, Deborah Cunliffe. So the first thing is, who is Deborah Cunliffe? Well, I went to the public registry of who nurses are, and I put the same surname Cunliffe in there. Funnily enough, there's no Deborahs. So there's 3 surnames Cunliffe in New Zealand. So apparently this person doesn't appear to be a nurse. And I guess she kind of offsets that by saying healthcare practitioners, but this person is not a nurse according to the register, but she's speaking on behalf of Nurses for Freedom. I find that peculiar. Chewy, I don't know if you've got it handy, but there was a Twitter feed last night talking about going through all the 600-ish nurses and Nurses for Freedom. And do they find none? Is that what they said?
They found, so after they went back and they had another go once some people changed their online names to their real names, and out of the 650 odd members of the Nurses for Freedom Facebook group, there are 10 who are registered nurses.
Okay, so something else that Deborah, I think it was, says is Kiwis are a sensible bunch, and I'm like, yeah, of course we are. We know that being vaccinated is clearly the most sensible thing to do. We are a sensible bunch. She also says healthcare clearly matters to the people of New Zealand. Again, yes, that's why the vast majority of us are vaccinated, because actually healthcare and health in general matters. And she says, where I stopped the conversation, she talked on that we're going to be no more likely to pass on COVID than a vaccinated nurse. So I thought that doesn't sound right to me. I thought I'd read something about that a few times. So I went and had a look at, I just Googled it really, but we all know about what the conversation is, academic people writing and having academic rigor through what they write before it gets published. So this is what they say about that. This article is written by Richard Wainwright. Vaccinated people clear the virus faster with lower levels of virus overall and have less time with very high levels of virus present. Therefore, vaccinated people are, on average, likely to be less contagious. So just a straight out incorrect, funnily enough, scientific fact from Nurses for Freedom. And if you want to know a bit more about who they are and what they do, maybe not their spokesperson, but the actual group themselves, let's have a listen to one person from the Nurses for Freedom group to the responses when she's talking to infamous broadcasting anti-vaxxer now Liz Gunn about what she has to say about why she's participating in the Nurses for Freedom.
I'm a nurse with 21 years experience, and I've got 2 children. I'm a solo mum, and I got terminated in December because I chose to honor my natural immunity.
No, so this is the thing. She did make a choice. She chose not to get vaccinated. Just be blunt on that. We've had this conversation.
No one's taken her choice away. She made a choice knowing what
made a choice. The choice had consequences. She made a choice not to be vaccinated.
And I'd done my research, which I feel was...
Does that sound familiar? Done my research? How much have we heard that from the various freedom groups?
An opportunity where information that was available from overseas was omitted, discredited, censored, ignored. You can take your pick. But we were in a position where we could have done something really significant as a nation and not pursued this avenue of the one source of truth and the one and only gold nugget treatment that, quite frankly, hasn't worked.
So whatever the one source of truth is, we've heard that before by numerous conspiracy theorists about the government, the one source of truth. And it sounds like she's saying that they don't want to have a gold standard of healthcare. That bit towards the end about the gold nugget, it didn't make a lot of sense to me. Let's also go now to this interview that we were just watching the start of, which was with the Nurses for Freedom, how that interview actually wrapped up. And I thought it was interesting. I thought there was a lot of criticism about that. In fact, Spinoff wrote about it, and I won't read the Spinoff article, but they put up as a part of their write-up, which was, please stop interviewing Voices for Freedom leaders. They put up a picture of Scooby-Doo, where when you pulled the mask off, Nurses for Freedom, underneath it were Voices for Freedom. Even though in that interview, she claims that they're not affiliated at all. So platform, what are they called? Not the platform. The project platformed them. They put them on. They had quite a bit of pushback about that and quite a bit of, about what they did. But interesting, at the end of it, pretty much all of the hosts with the same voice said the same thing.
We need the staff, but for one, I wouldn't want a family member being treated by an unvaccinated nurse.
I'm the same. I'm sorry. I just want to know that my healthcare workers are vaccinated and that they're all in the same camp.
Just for God's sake, get the jab, go back to work. Take one for the team. Every now and then we have to do something we don't want to do. But your country's calling. Get the jab and go back. I don't care what your rationale is behind. Your country's saying we need you. So go and do something. It was like me fielding under the helmet. I didn't want to do it, but I did it for the good of the country.
Right. Thanks, Mike.
Did it work? Did you win?
Never caught one.
I mean, whether you love him or hate him, and I think I know what you do. That was a funny joke.
I hate it when people that I don't like make good points. Makes me feel icky.
So I want to wrap up this bit with just a reminder of the conversation we had just last night. Oh, actually, I better just do this because that started off the next YouTube clip, and that would have been funny once I turn the volume back up. And this, I think, is actually the most important bit. I really genuinely do feel like this is the most important bit, which is even if the mandates were gone, right, that most nurses of the 10 can't go back to work anyway because they have a collective agreement, a collective contract that says you have to be vaccinated.
Yeah.
So even if the mandate goes away, then their own employment law says you still have to be vaccinated. And this is just a very short clip from last night. How long is it? It's only 25 seconds with the director of Nurses Society of New Zealand, David Wells, explaining that very, very quickly.
We've got employment agreements, including collective employment agreements that we've negotiated, that have a requirement for all these staff to be vaccinated.
Right.
So even when the mandate goes, we will be having in most workplaces a requirement for people to be vaccinated until we've got better vaccines that completely eliminate COVID or whatever.
So there you go. So can we stop this now? I mean, whether you agree or disagree with any of the freedom groups, especially the nurses ones, whether you agree or disagree with what vaccines are, can we please stop the conversation around the nurses in particular? As Chewy's just said, the actual nurses on the 650 list, about 10 of them are possibly nurses, like registered nurses that could go back to work. But if those 10 nurses do get an opportunity to go back to work, there's a very good chance, and I don't think Dave was saying every single nurse in the country has this contract, but there's a very good chance that their contract's going to insist that they're vaccinated anyway. So it's such a moot point, and I think we should just and remember 60,000 nurses in the country. Even if there were 600 on this list, that's 0.01%. And as we were talking about last night, and David did confirm this to us as someone who works in the nursing industry, 600 nurses tomorrow, boop, placed into the healthcare is not going to do a thing to the crisis. Now, the so-called crisis, be it a crisis or not, but it won't do anything. I mean, it'll help in some areas, but it'll add 0.1% to the actual working nurses. Now, if Chewy's number, or the research that Chewy's referring to his number is correct, and it's actually only 10 nurses, then what's that going to do to 60,000? Exactly. So it's a moot point being beaten up by many people, including the opposition, but in some of the cases, the media, and it's utter horseshit, and we need to stop it. And if you get a chance to spread some truth, here's one truth you can spin. The likely scenario with those nurses is when the mandates come off, they're going to have to get that vaccine anyway because it's a part of their collective contract. There you go. There's a rebuttal and a truth. And if people want to challenge you on that, just send them my way. That's all right. Just send them my way and we'll show them the clips.
I just think of my sister who's a nurse, and look, she's said to me many times, if she had her way, she wouldn't have got the vaccine. She had some health challenges, and she was worried about whether the vaccine was going to affect those. And nobody could give her an answer on that. But she weighed up why she got into nursing, what she does, and she made that call. You know, as Mark Richardson said, she took one for the team, for everyone. And that she did that with some pretty big question marks for her own sake.
On reflection, is she happy with her decision, or would she still like if she hasn't had any impact from it? And look, there are vaccine injuries out there. They're very, very, very small number. But in reflection, is she okay with it, or did she still look back and go, I wish
she hasn't had any issues?
Yeah.
I mean, the comment that she said to me yesterday when I was asking her about her opinion, because I didn't want to be the guy that wades into a conversation about nurses without actually speaking to one. She was like, yeah, if I could have avoided taking the jab, I would have done it. But it was a question of being a nurse or not being a nurse. And she got into nursing to help people. So, yeah, I give her a lot more weight than the guys that went, no, I just don't want to jab. And yeah, good luck, everybody. I'm out.
Interesting as well. And it's kind of, this might sound a little bit judgy, but hey, it's what we do. That nurses, people like nurses, doctors, ambulance officers, policemen at some level should do, firefighters. One of the things they do is they kind of put others before themselves. You know, like when you go into a situation, you use your professional expertise to help someone else, to keep someone else safe. You know, it's not quite the same with the police, but you know what I'm saying? So the other thing is about, and I wonder if that's why David Wills last night was saying the profession doesn't want them back, because they've gone, fuck you all, I want what I want. It doesn't feel like the kind of person you want to have treating you in your most vulnerable moment. I'm being a bit judgy, I know that, but you know what I mean? It's like, it feels a bit off.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Let's finish up now, but let's just get to a few of their messages that have been coming in. How many nurses actually lost their job due to not being vaxxed? And would people have been fine with them as being their own nurse in 2019? Seems to me TV programming programs opinions. TV programming, probably comma, programs opinions. Well, it does. I mean, that's why you got to look at things and find out what's going on. And as people are confirming what you said, fewer than 10, apparently, Chewy, is what the number was, fewer than 10. Paul, I said, Paul's a darling. I said I was being unprofessional, and he said, not as unprofessional as that project base. That's just, I'll take that with a tongue in cheek. Dave says, all anti-vaxxer and anti-lockdown arguments are untenable. None hold up under investigation in terms of the actual and relative risks. Speaking of the vaccine, look, and this is fair. Outdated vaccines are pretty crap. I wouldn't say pretty crap, but I would say aren't as good at preventing transmission as they were at the start. I agree with that. That's the evidence is there, but they still have some effect, definitely. But misinformed, anti-science, potential spreaders of disinformation as well as COVID shouldn't be nurses. Yeah, that's interesting, actually. I know someone who goes to a doctor who might actually be unvaccinated by choice, and I kind of go, if they take that kind of unscientific decision, how can you kind of trust them with your healthcare at all? I mean, again, bit judgy. I get it, but if they're going to choose that route of non-science and they're in the healthcare professions, what happens when you need to trust their science, you know, and what they're doing for you? Last one, David says, even all New Zealand armed forces cannot travel overseas without being vaccinated. It is a court-martial offence to refuse to be vaccinated, or they just kick you out, because I know someone who's going through it at the moment who might not want to get boosted, and they're just going to be out on their ear.
Actually, can you chuck up crazy old world's comment there?
I'll go back. 21 years, that one?
Yeah, exactly. First thing I thought of when I saw it. How old do you think that nurse that was Liz Gunn was interviewing? How old do you reckon she was? She said she had 21 years experience. She does not look my age.
Well, I mean, you can be a nurse from under 20. She could be mid to late 30s. I mean, 21 years experience. How long does it take to become a nurse at university? 3 years. So you're in there at yeah. I mean, she could be 40, 41, 42. 42 would be fine. I mean, to be 21 years. Mind you, she hasn't worked for the last 6 months, so technically it's 21 years minus 6 months. Maybe she was a nurse 21 and a half years ago. No, I mean, I don't know. Of what you're alleging, in your honest held belief, to make sure we don't get sued, is that person may be lying. Maybe they have. Maybe they're like, you know, you say, oh, you know, I've been in radio for 20 years, and it's like 17 or 18 because it's close to 20.
She said she had 2 kids, so she would have been off with them as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't stack up.
I'm being concerned about being too judgy, and you're being fucking judgy up the wazoo.
I'm here to be judgy. That's what you got. You're like, I need someone who's really judgy, and I was like, I'm your man. That's me. I make snap decisions. I'll point at people and go, no, bad.
Last one. So Deborah Cunliffe isn't a nurse. She also clearly isn't from the north of England, and she's just wrong. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with someone having an accent and commenting on New Zealand things, but yeah. Anyway, I want to go. We're done, because that was a bit of a stressful night with my technical issues. And thank you, Chewy, for stepping into the front there. We'll need
Don't
to
worry. You'll see how wide my eyes went when your picture just disappeared.
I had to leave.
Oh my God, the adults are gone.
No, I had to leave. I left the studio, like as in the studio, the virtual studio, because the cameras wouldn't sort themselves out. So I actually left the studio and re-logged in. So you guys were all by yourselves for maybe up to 60 seconds, Chewy.
Terrifying. Never do that to me again. Never.
All right, team. Hey, we'll see you all tomorrow night from 10 p.m. Thanks for joining us. Remember, #share our shit. We've got a couple of clips up today if you want to go have a look on the YouTube channel or on my Twitter feed, you'll find them as well. Probably Chewy's Twitter feed as well, because I tag them in all the ones that, especially that Chewy is in. And should we put that up? Should we put that up? How do I do that again? Where is it? I got to find it. No, that's just me. That's us. There we go. Ghost Inferno and Pat Brittenden. And other than that, we'll see you tomorrow night from 10 p.m. Gosh, see, there's still comments coming in. I always feel bad when I finish up. Oh, it's just Carl saying thanks. And Paul wanting to know about Star Wars. I haven't watched the last one yet, so maybe tomorrow. We'll see. I'm gonna try.
When you have, we will.
I get the sense that you really dislike the last 3. Is that right? You really
about it for 40 minutes.
So you really dislike the last 3?
The last 2.
I kind of find them to be, because I'm not like you, named after a Wookiee, I can take them in isolation as just movies. I don't have to assess them.
Part of my personality.
Yeah, fair enough.
I can't.
So when I said last night,
I've got it inked into my skin, man.
Yeah, no, I get it. I'm not quite that much of a, Now, if it was about the Care Bears, I'd be up there with you, but not. All right, guys, we'll catch you tomorrow night from 10. Hooroo.
Okay.